my name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic. It is 8:30. Let's try to grab our seats and quiet down, settle down a little bit. Important message. Our speaker texted me they're going to be 5 minutes late. So luckily we burned up about 7 minutes with all the introductions and early meeting hoopla. So we'll start with that and we'll have some fun tonight. Anyway, our chairperson tonight, fabulous chairperson. Let's welcome Kara up here to do a great job.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. My name's Kara, and I'm an alcoholic. It would help if I grabbed the right speech, wouldn't it? We are alcoholics. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street, Doylestown, PA. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. and speaker at 8:30 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God, reliance, and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. Re-record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name only?
Hi, my name is Philip. I'm from North Wales. I came to Marshall.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Dana.
Welcome.
JC, Secretary.
Welcome, JC.
Jeff,
Welcome, Jeff. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? Denny, you have an announcement in the back? Oh, okay. Our sister group is a big book study that meets every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. just up the street at Salem, UCC Church, 186 East Court Street, Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Coffee starts at 6:15. And I really encourage, if anybody wants a wonderful breakdown of the big book, Ron and Eric do a fabulous job. And we also have another meeting here Monday at 6 p.m. and it's a wonderful step meeting. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purpose of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations. All CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown PA, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there. Join our Facebook page to keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. Now I would like to introduce Jeff, who would like to come up and read Just for Today, Prayer of Recovery. Let's give Jeff a warm welcome.
Hello, everybody. Jeff, alcoholic.
Yeah.
Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except for myself. Is that it? And now let's welcome Lisa, who I believe is going to read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm an alcoholic. The preamble of AA. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other so that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And Michelle is coming up next.
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle and I'm a recovering alcoholic. And these are the 12 steps of recovery. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Kara?
The seventh tradition states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover food, rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops, etc. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, I'd like to introduce the speaker. As a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, we have invited Mariel H from New Jersey to come speak for us. Let's give Mariel a warm welcome.
Hi, my name is Mariel. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for having me. Thanks for asking me to come speak. I got a text from Ron that said, you spoke at our group 7 years ago. Are you ready to come back? 7 years ago. So I have a sobriety date. It's May 7th, 2007. I have a sponsor who is a sponsor. I have the privilege and pain in the butt of sponsoring other women. And I truly am unequivocally positive that the only reason and the only way that I stand in front of you tonight is through the grace of God, good sponsorship, the 12 steps, and you find people. So I get to talk about my favorite topic for the next hour. So I hope you guys enjoy hearing about me as much as I enjoy hearing about me. And so, you know, what does the book tell us, right? The book tells us that we share in a general way, right, about what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I think it's important to make the distinction. Sometimes, and let me preface, AA has no opinions. Mariel has a lot of them. So I think sometimes we make the mistake of talking about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And my experience is that, and I take the big book, not per se as gospel, but I think that the words in the big book are very, very intentional, right? And the difference between me telling you what it was like and what I was like is that your story may not be identical to mine. You may not have the same level of consequences. You might not have the same circumstances in your life. And if you're anything like me, I'm looking for a way to identify right on out of here, right? And the difference is that even though if our circumstances are different, if you suffer from what I suffer from, which is spiritual malady, alcoholism, and I share about what I was like, you're going to relate to me. Because when I share about what I am like, right, I share about the feelings that are associated with my alcoholism. I share about the hopelessness, the despair, the anxiety, the rage, the resentment, the paralyzing inability to do anything without a drink, right? And what I have found is that that is what connects us as alcoholics, right? So my favorite story about my alcoholism has nothing to do with drinking, right? And I'm going to tell you it because I think it encapsulates what I suffer from, which is being sober, to be honest, right? I don't really relate with people who talk about alcohol as a problem. Let's be clear, alcohol caused a lot of problems in my life, right? But I am not a problem drinker. I'm a solution drinker. I drink for what alcohol does to me and what alcohol does for me. And I want as much as I can get, as fast as I can get, so that I can have the effect produced by alcohol. So my issue is not drinking. If my issue was drinking, I would put down the drink and I would be fine. And I wouldn't have to be here on a Saturday night, 16 years sober, almost 16 years sober, speaking to you, right? I would just stop drinking. My issue is being sober, right? And so way before I picked up a drink, and I could have used a drink in kindergarten, and I mean that. But way before I picked up a drink, I must have been about 5 or 6 years old, and this elderly woman who lived upstairs from me, her name was Billy Shub, she babysat me, and she did everything in her human power, and I use those words carefully and intentionally now that I've been here for a while. I certainly didn't have any understanding of this pre-Alcoholics Anonymous, and certainly not when I was 5 or 6. But she did everything in her human power. She was a wonderful babysitter. She loved me. She fed me. She clothed me. She bathed me. She, played with me. She did all of the things, right? And so what would happen is, what I understand today is restless irritability and discontentment. I would begin to get itchy, right? And so when I would get itchy, I would steal her glasses and I would hide them. And she would notice that they were missing because she needed them to see, right? And she would ask me for help to help find her glasses. And being the, helpful little girl that I was, I jumped the charge and I would help her look for her glasses. And because I had hid them, I always was able to find them, right? And I would present her with her glasses, right? And what happened in that moment, stay with me, just stay with me, is the magic, right? Is in that moment, she showered me with love, attention, affection, and praise, right? So what I needed is I needed more than what you were giving me, more than what she was giving me, even though she was giving me everything that was good and giving me her best, right? I needed more. I needed you, I needed it, I needed her to make me feel whole, to make me feel good, to make me feel okay. And we live forwards, we understand backwards, right? I surely did not know that that was my motivation at the time, right? But that is the essence of my alcoholism. It is that I need to get okay. And I rely on you or on it, whatever it is, to get okay. And that's why I really needed a drink, badly. I really needed to drink badly. And I finally find alcohol at about 11 or 12, and I don't have a first drink story. Sometimes I think about making one up, right? That's like sexy or fabulous or scandalous, and because I want you guys to like me, right? I want to fit in. But the truth is, and that's all I can share with you, is I really don't remember my first drink. What I remember, though, is I remember how I started drinking and the type of drinker I was when I found alcohol. And the type of drinker that I was when I found alcohol was I drank alone and I drank stolen alcohol, which, to be honest, is about the type of drinker I was when I stopped drinking, too. But so I took as much alcohol as I could get from my mom's liquor cabinet, and wanting to get away with it, what that meant is that I was drinking in like a Chinese food Tupperware container, like some disgusting concoction of like peach schnapps, vermouth, tequila, and brandy, or like, something really appalling. And why that's important for me to comprehend my alcoholism is that my experience was not peer pressure. My experience was not appletinis that tasted good and I drank a little bit too many and felt the effect produced by alcohol. My experience from the very beginning was that I was drinking for the effect produced by alcohol so I could get as much in me as fast as possible so that I could get relief. And it's important for me to understand that that is why I drank. And so I got sober when I was 21, so I don't have years and years and years of, drunkalogs or drinking stories or consequences to tell you all about. However, what I know is, and the big book tells us, that women especially do not have to drink for as long or as much to be the real deal alcoholic. I also know that my disease of alcoholism was very, very progressive, and that by the time I got here, I was on my hands and knees this close to death, right? And what I would have told you when I got here is that I was a victim of circumstance, and that life had handed me a really hard deal, and that alcoholism had robbed me of everything good in my life. And I wouldn't have been lying, but I would have been inaccurate, right? Because what I've experienced and what I've received here in Alcoholics Anonymous has been a change in my perception and a different type of understanding about my behaviors, my actions, my attitudes, and my ideas. And what I've come to understand is that what my life looked like before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous is not because alcoholism took anything away from me. It was because I freely gave it all away. That there was absolutely no price that I was not willing to pay to get my next drink. Period. Hard stop. And what that looked like in the beginning was things like boyfriends, or relationships, or grades, or cars, or the trust of people who loved me. And what that looked like in the end was things like my dignity, my self-worth, my self-esteem, any type of meaningful connection with myself, God, or another human being. And on the outside, what it looked like is it looked like being a homeless prostitute living on the streets of Norwalk, Connecticut, not being able to look in the mirror if I had access to a mirror, because really I was living in an abandoned car, being willing to do anything I needed to do to get my next drink. I didn't care who I hurt. If you were in between me and a drink, you were just simply in my way. And, being 20 years old, living that type of lifestyle, being any years old, living that type of lifestyle opens you up for a world of pain and a world of shame. And alcohol stopped numbing that. Alcohol stopped taking it away, and alcohol stopped working. Because I'll be honest, y'all, if alcohol still worked, I wouldn't be here. If I could still get the effect produced by alcohol, the relief, I'd still drink. But it stopped working. And I'll tell you, I think that is the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I've been in some pretty precarious situations. But when alcohol stopped working, and I didn't know another way of living, the only thing that ever had allowed me to feel like I fit in my skin stopped working. And so what my drinking looked like at the end was like fetal position, tears strewn down my face, rocking, with a bag or a bottle in my hand, not wanting to drink, wanting to drink, drinking, and feeling exactly the same as I did before I drank. And thank God I didn't kill myself, because it was so painful. And so I ended up at a treatment center, by no doing of my own. My married boyfriend at the time told me he would leave his wife if I went to treatment, and I thought that was a really good deal. They're still married, by the way. And so off to treatment I went with no intention of getting sober or being sober, but we talk about seconds and inches, right? We talk about these divine fingerprints all over our stories and all over our lives. And for whatever reason, right, which for me in that moment was like, oh, Charlie will divorce Debbie, right? But the universe conspired me to be removed from my situation for a period of time. And I began to be able to experience the grace that is, this unwarranted gift that God shows us. And we all get grace all the time. Unwarranted gift means we're undeserving of it, right? So it has nothing to do with how smart we are, how tall we are, how fat or skinny we are, or how well behaved we are. Grace has nothing to do with that, right? However, my opinion is, even though that grace is falling on all of us all of the time, is that most of the time my heart is shut, my ears are shut, and my eyes are shut, so I don't receive the grace, right? And for whatever reason at this point, this shift began, where I begin to have these moments of grace, right? And so I'm in this treatment center with no desire to be or stay sober, and the clinician says, I think you need more than 30 days of treatment. Would you be open to going to a long-term treatment center? I don't want to be sober, guys, right? For whatever reason, I say yes, right? And so let me also just qualify that with the treatment center. At the time, it was February, I was homeless, and the treatment center was in Florida, so that might have been part of the motivation. Full disclosure. But I said yes, right? And so I'm at this treatment center, and there are about 90 days, and this boy shows up, which is really the bad beginning to all of the stories of my life. A boy shows up. What was special about this boy, not his six-pack and tattoos and blue eyes, right? What was special about this boy is that we had drank one time together in Connecticut. And clearly the universe had parted the sea for us to be reunited in this treatment center. And the treatment center was talking about tapping into God's will, right? Clearly, right in front of me, the sign was painted that Tyler and I were meant to be together forever. And that he had been placed there as a gift from the universe. And so we decided the only way that could happen, though, would be if we ran away, right? And so, ironically, right, I do think it was God's will that Tyler was placed there, because these series of circumstances are the series of circumstances that end up getting me sober. So the universe was absolutely conspiring for my greatest good. I just misunderstood the message, which, 16 years later is still the story most of the time, right? So Tyler and I run away from this treatment center. It's very romantic. We're in Delray Beach, Florida. We run to the ocean. We have like our room keys around our neck and we're throwing them in the ocean. Maybe not so romantic, but it felt like it was the beginning of this new life, right? And it lasted about 3 hours. Right? It lasted about 3 hours. And in 3 hours, I was on my back with a man I didn't know in a dirty motel doing what I needed to do to get my next drink. And why that's important for me to share with you is at the time I was sober 90 days. I was 90 days removed from alcohol. So if putting down the drink was enough, that wouldn't have happened. But for me, putting down the drink is not enough. For me, the problem is when I'm sober. The problem for me is not stopping drinking. The problem for me is stopped drinking because it is frickin' unbearable to be sober. Unbearable. I can't look at you in the eye. I can't stop the noise in my head about what I should have done or what I could have done or what you said or what you meant by what you said or why you looked at me that way or, why I'm such a failure or why I'm so fat or why I'm not smart enough or I just can't shut it off. I just can't shut it off. This lump in my throat, this knot in my chest, it's like overwhelming. The tightness in my shoulders, this paralyzing fear. It's unbearable. It's unbearable. If you felt that way, you would drink too. I need a drink to breathe. So my problem is being sober. And so on May 7th, 2007, which is my sobriety date, Tyler and I were jumping on freight trains, which apparently is a felony in the great state of Florida. It might be one here too, I'm not sure, but it's called interference with a railroad. And the New Smyrna Beach Police Department saw fit to remove me from said freight train and bring me to Volusia County Correctional Facility. And just so you get an idea of how out of my mind I am, Tyler and I were trying to get out of Florida, right? And we were going south on the trains. So he got the geography. Let me catch you up. So Florida is the southernmost point of the east coast of the United States. So unless we were planning on taking a boat to Cuba, which we weren't, we were going the wrong way. And so I'd had my first and only legal drink, and it was a box of red wine. And on May 7th, 2007, I went to jail. And why that's important is because I haven't picked up a drink since May 7th, 2007. I did not want to be sober on May 7th, 2007. And I think that sometimes we do a disservice here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and again, this is Mariel's opinion, I preface it when it's my opinion, by saying things like, oh, you need to want it. I didn't want to be sober on May 7th, 2007. And my experience, having been here almost 16 years at this point, is there's a lot of people who want to be sober and aren't sober, or don't stay sober. Or we say things like, oh, you need to be sober. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of people that need to be sober and they're dead. My experience is that Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery is a process for people who do it, regardless of what they want and regardless of what they need. And so I also think we sell people short by perhaps bullying folks that don't necessarily want to be here yet, right? And my experience is that I didn't want to be here for the first couple of months. but I came anyway. And by coming here long enough, I got hooked up with the right people, and the right people got me into action, and I've never had to leave. So how did I get here from jail, right? I end up at a clubhouse in Delray Beach with a duffel bag of my belongings. I'm homeless, fresh out of jail. I have a stuffed unicorn named Happy, a raggedy old big book that I stole from somebody in the treatment center, and a couple changes of clothes. And I end up at this clubhouse, and I put my stuff underneath the coffee pot, and I walk into the meeting, and I say what probably is the first honest words I've ever said in my life. I said, "Hi, my name's Mariel, I'm an alcoholic. I just got out of jail. I really want to drink, but I really don't want to drink. I'm scared, and I need help." And what happened in that moment is the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You guys surrounded me. And I have chills just thinking about it, because the people in that clubhouse saved my life. They absolutely saved my life. How did they save my life? In a couple of ways. One, they were generous to me upon no end, right? They offered me shelter, they offered me clothing, they offered me cigarettes, they offered me food, and most importantly, they offered me love and acceptance. At a time that I wasn't that lovable, right? As much as I had that moment where I asked for help and was vulnerable, I was angry, I was mean, I was prideful, I was positive that I knew better than you, which my track record clearly showed that I didn't, right? But I was not gentle or lovable when I got here. And you guys were gentle and loving regardless of how I showed up. And that, hand in hand with the fact that you guys got me into service so quick, I am positive is what saved my life. And so, let's be honest, I didn't have a lot going on, right? So I wasn't bedeviled by meetings, right? Or commitments. And I literally camped out in the clubhouse, right? I went to the 7 a.m. meeting, I went to the 9:30 meeting, I went to the noon meeting, I went to the 4:30 meeting, the 5:30 meeting, the 7:30 meeting, the 8:30 meeting, right? I picked up cigarette butts, I swept, I set up chairs, I broke down tables, made the coffee, and I just was planted at that clubhouse. So another one of my opinions is that we do a disservice to the newcomer by telling them to get a sponsor who has what they want. Because that's what those people in that clubhouse told me to do. And so what I looked for and what I found was a woman who'd been removed from alcohol for 14 years. She had a Mustang. She had an attractive fiance. She had a house with a pool. And I was like, that is absolutely what I want. So I'm going to ask her to sponsor me. My opinion is that we need to be telling new people to get a sponsor who has had a spiritual experience as a result of the 12 steps, who has worked the 12 steps as outlined in the big book and is willing to take you through that same process. And this woman, well-intended, I'm unequivocally positive she was well-intended, hadn't had that experience. And so I talked about the scariest moment of my life being when alcohol stopped working. Hand in hand with that scariest moment is when I was an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous and I wanted to die. Right? I had done what you all had told me my whole life. If you just stop drinking, Mariel, you'll be okay. I had stopped drinking and I was not okay. Remember, my problem is being sober. So I'm like suicidal, homicidal. At this point, I'm living in a halfway house. I'm stealing from the girls I live with, wearing the clothes, and they're like, "Is that my sweatshirt?" And I'm like, "No, it's mine." I am active in an eating disorder. I am, actively thinking about killing myself. I'm definitely actively thinking about drinking. Like the kind of crazy I'm experiencing is like I'm in the supermarket at the 10-item aisle counting your items and telling you, like, lady, you need to move. You have 11 bananas. And she's like, do you even work at Publix? I'm like, no, but you need to move. Like, that's how my alcoholism manifests when I'm not drinking, which is why I have to drink, because it's unbearable, right? And so I believe the only reason why I was able to stay through that is because this clubhouse forced me into service. So even though I wanted to drink, and even though I wanted to die, right, I was busy being of service all the time. I remember there was a July 4th picnic, this big picnic at Lake Ida Park, and they told me that my job that day was going to be to take and count the money at the door. And I was like, all right, let me get this straight. I was like, I'm like 2 months sober, coming off a $1,500 a day habit, 1 foot out the door, and you want me to count the money for the picnic? And they're like, yeah. I was like, you're dumb, but okay. And I really believe what I understand today is that they knew that it was not even a 50-50 shot, that it was like a 80-20 shot that I was going to steal the money and leave. What I also believe is that they made a conscious decision that it was possible, that by being of service in that capacity that day, that I just might stay. And that the risk of me stealing the money was worth it for the chance that I might stay sober because of being of service that day. And so that's the type of people that I was surrounded with that kept me being of service, which I believe is the only thing that kept me sober, because I was dying from alcoholism. I was dying sober from alcoholism. And, the people who were laughing and the people who had bright, shiny eyes, they were talking about God, and they were talking about inventory, and they were talking about these steps. And so I was like, I guess I could do that, right? And so I start to write my own inventory. I strongly recommend that you write an inventory, but I also strongly recommend that you do it under the direction of a sponsor who's written an inventory before. So I'm writing this inventory. It's not top to bottom, left to right. It's not, I don't know what it is. It's zigzag. I don't know what I'm writing, but I'm doing my best to write this inventory. And I bring it proudly to this woman who was my sponsor at the time. And I present it to her. And she looks at me and she looks at the inventory. She looks at me and she looks at the inventory and she looks at me. She takes a deep sigh and she says, Mariel, I think you're too sick for me to sponsor you, and I think you need to get another sponsor. And what I will tell you is that until I was about 6 years sober, I hated this woman. I thought she had let me down. I thought she had, done a disservice to me. And thank God that by staying here, Alcoholics Anonymous has softened my heart and changed my perception time and time again. Because what I understand is that what that woman did is probably the most humble and brave thing she could have done. Because we cannot transmit what we do not have. And what I needed was a spiritual experience as a result of the 12 steps. And she had not experienced that, so she could not give that to me. And thank God she did not, out of hubris, continue to try to sponsor me. Because I probably would have drank and I probably would have died. And that night, I went to a young people's meeting, and there was a woman who was talking about the solution as it's outlined in the big book. And she also talked about experiences with drinking that I related to. And I went up to her that night and I literally threw up on her and told her that my sponsor had fired me and I didn't know what to do, and Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't working for me, and I wanted to drink and I wanted to die. And this woman took my hand and she took me through the 12 steps exactly as outlined in the big book. And she held onto my hand long enough to put it in God's hand, and then made it very, very clear to me that I was required to do the same thing. And my first sponsor was not very nice to me, which was also exactly what I needed. right? I am manipulative, I am strong-headed, strong-willed, I'm stubborn, and I'm pretty smart. And if I'd had someone who'd like patted me on the butt and said, oh, it's gonna be okay, we're gonna get through this together, I would have railroaded her, right? And what my first sponsor did is she cared more about my life than my feelings. She was not my friend, and she made that very clear. She said, yeah, you mightn't hear, we have poker at my house on Friday nights, you're not invited until you've done your 5th step. It's like, what? Why do you want to be my friend? I'm so fabulous. She said, I'm going to give you direction, and you're going to do it. Or you're not. Ball's in your court. She said, and you can get better as fast as you want, or you can stay sick as long as you want. And if you want to surprise a sponsor, do everything they say. And what I will tell you is at that time, I was in so much pain that she could have told me to get naked and somersault while trying to, push an acorn with my nose, and I would have done it. That would have been really terrible direction, and if anyone tells you to do that, I don't recommend doing it. But that's how willing I was. And the only reason I was that willing is because I was in so much pain, right? Because what we ask people to do here in Alcoholics Anonymous, let's be real, it does not make sense, right? I'm telling you that my life is on fire, that I can't pay rent, that my boyfriend is cheating on me, that I lost my job, and you're like, you should help somebody. I'm like, did you hear me? Like, did you hear me? How is that the solution, right? And so my experience is that until I was broken down and beaten, and the book talks about alcohol as the great persuader, I never would have followed this direction, ever. And so my hope and my prayer for new people is that they are in so much pain, it hurts to breathe. And I don't say that because I want anyone to be in pain. I just know that the willingness to follow this astronomically paradoxical direction, for me at least, only comes from the desperation of the broken woman. And so I did everything that she told me, without fail. She gave me an assignment, I went and I read it, and I called her back 35 minutes later. Like, she told me to jump, and I said, how high? What happened as a direct result of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is that I was rearranged from the inside out, right? That my perception on life changed. My perception of myself changed. My perception of you changed. And my perception and my relationship with alcohol changed. And what I found here in Alcoholics Anonymous is the same relief that I found from alcohol. It didn't come as quick as a sip from a bottle, but really what I have found here is the ability to live in my own skin and be okay 95% of the time. And so, So I do everything alcoholically. That's just how I operate, right? Drink alcoholically, I do everything alcoholically. So I did Alcoholics Anonymous alcoholically when I got here. And so what do I mean by that? I knew that Alcoholics Anonymous had saved my life. And I knew that the gratitude that I felt and the obligation that my sponsor had made clear to me, right? I also don't think I knew that the things she said were optional, right? I think I just thought that I needed to do them. But she made very clear to me that I needed to sponsor people and I needed to be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous once I'd completed the 12 steps. So I just took those as marching orders. However, I was like super extreme, which again, I know unequivocally saved my life because I'm a really, really sick alcoholic. But so like, going to the 7 a.m. meeting with a sponsee at IHOP, going to work, meeting with a sponsee at lunch, going back to work, going to a meeting after dinner, meeting with a sponsee after the meeting, right? Like that's the way I threw myself, like every moment into Alcoholics Anonymous. And what began to happen is I began to have quite a bit of ego and quite a bit of arrogance about the type of Alcoholics Anonymous member I was, and that I was doing it better than most, and that there was a very, very, very specific way that Alcoholics Anonymous needed to be done, and unless you agreed with me, you were wrong. So the type of hubris that I'm talking about is like people who'd been sober 30 years and I'd been sober 9 months, not using the word recovered when talking about alcoholism. And me like whipping out the big book and showing all of the places that it's outlined that we recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and that clearly, sir, you're doing it wrong. That's the type of hubris I'm talking about. And so this spiritual pride, this spiritual arrogance that I had, again, it kept me sober, absolutely. And I also am positive that it helped me to help a lot of people during that period of time. But what it also did is it started to separate me from you. It started to separate me from you. It also fueled this delusion that I needed to be perfect, right? Because I was walking around already like I was better than you, right? So if I was better than you, I needed to be perfect, right? You couldn't know how flawed and how broken I am. And so why that's important to share with you is that I have done nothing perfect in the last 15 and a half years except not drink, right? In fact, I've probably done most things wrong in the last 15 and a half years, right? When I was 2 years sober, I stole the money from the basket as the treasurer. When I was 3 years sober, I 13-step a newcomer and I moved him into my house, 17 days out detox. When I was 4 years sober, I was still using my mom's credit card without her knowledge, right? Like I have done some really wrong things sober, and thank God I have not drank, right? My experience is that I can do anything and stay sober, except be dishonest with you guys. And so here I am walking around this AA big shot, right? Sponsoring all these women, speaking at all these meetings, doing all of this service. And once again, I'm starting to die on the inside, right? And in the big book it talks about the alcoholic lives this double life. It talks about us wanting a reputation that doesn't necessarily match up with what we do on our sprees. And my experience is that is absolutely true drinking, but it's absolutely true sober for me as well, right? And that because I care so desperately about what you think about me, I start to compartmentalize who I am and how I'm living, because you can't know about that. And the way, the obsession to drink alcohol has been removed from me, luckily, for over 15 years at this point, and never to have returned. Fleeting thoughts, sure, that I recoil from like a hot flame, but the obsession has never returned. So if my alcoholism, if I heard a voice in my head that said, Mariel, you should pick up a drink, I'd be like, that's stupid. Like, that's not the solution, right? The way my alcoholism talks to me today is you don't need to tell them that. They won't understand. You don't need to do all of that, right? That's the way my alcoholism talks to me. And the purpose of that talk is to separate me from you. And if I get separated far enough from you, then my alcoholism might tell me to pick up a drink. And if I'm far enough away from you, it might not seem like such a crazy thought, right? And so at this point, at 4 years sober, I don't want to drink, but I'm back in the fetal position, tears strewn down my face, this time just wanting to die. Not wanting to drink, just wanting to die. Because I'm living this double life in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am a liar, I'm a thief, I'm a cheat. I'm in a terribly toxic, abusive relationship. I'm active in an eating disorder all over again. And I'm like, sponsoring 15 girls and, speaking at meetings, quoting the big book. I'm dying on the inside. And once again, right, the grace of God, good sponsorship, and the 12 steps show up, right? And begrudgingly, and much to my chagrin, right, my feet have been trained in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'm doing the service, and I start to get honest about what's going on, right? And so I stop being separated from you. And once I'm united with you guys again, I can re-engage in this connection with higher power. Because it would be really nice to just go meditate and levitate and, be connected to God. That doesn't work for me. I've tried it. And when I say I've tried it, I mean, I might have tried it more than you guys. I've meditated in the Himalayan mountains. I sold all my stuff and I went to an ashram for 9 months. I have tried aggressively pursuing God, right? And there is nothing wrong with that. Those are some of the most magical experiences in my life I've had. However, I can't get to God if I don't have you. That's just my experience. I can't get to God if I don't have you. And so by getting honest and shedding these layers of shame for who I am, on the way I'm acting, and the type of person that I am, allows me to join Alcoholics Anonymous in a meaningful way. And so at about 6 years sober, I moved from Florida after the ashram. So I went from Florida to the ashram, and then I come to New Jersey. And can I tell you, there is nothing more challenging that I have done ever than moving in sobriety. Moving in sobriety is hard. And again, this is an opinion of Mariel's. I know that it was my responsibility to put my hand out. I know that my sobriety, no one is responsible or in charge of my sobriety except me. But I will tell you, at 6 years sober, it was so humbling to be new in a room. And what that experience has done to me is it has softened my heart to remind me that we are really, really well trained to find the person who's counting days, whose first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous it is. I oftentimes forget about the person whose last day it might be in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not as trained to find that person. And this experience unequivocally softened me to look for the person whose last day it might be in Alcoholics Anonymous, because it was almost my last day in Alcoholics Anonymous a lot of times. And absolutely do I take responsibility for what I didn't do at that period of time, 100%. But it really wasn't easy. And perhaps it might have been a little bit easier if someone had come up to me and said, "Welcome to the area. Why don't we get coffee after the meeting?" And so that was in 2013. And I've been in New Jersey ever since. And I have had an opportunity to build this big, beautiful, shiny life that is absolutely beyond my wildest dreams, folks. I've grown up in Alcoholics Anonymous, literally. I got here at 20 years old, and I'm 36 years old today, right? And when I talk about life beyond my wildest dreams, right, I used to hate when you guys would say that, because I was like, I don't know how you church basement losers are going to help me tap into my wildest dreams, right? I was like, my wildest dreams have kilos and strippers and Ferraris, and I don't see the connect here, right? And what I've come to understand about that is that my life is beyond my wildest dreams, because the life I live today is a life I didn't even know I wanted. It's certainly one I didn't think I was capable of or deserving of, right? And what that looks like is it looks like things like meaningful relationships with people. It looks like when I put my head on the pillow, I'm pretty okay with who I am and how I walk through the day. It looks like the ability to look at you in the eye and not think that I'm less than or better than you. It looks like me being able to make eye contact with myself in the mirror. It looks like not totally obsessing over what I think you think about me and whether or not I'm enough for you. And then it also looks like things like getting married and having children and buying houses and having businesses and having a meaningful career and going back to school and backpacking through India and, eating at a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Florence. Like, it also looks like all of that, right? Like, my life is so big and beautiful and full of joy, right? But not every second. And I think that's important also, because life is hard and hard stuff happens. Hard stuff happens. When I was 8 years sober, my best friend, sober also, 27 years old at the time, got stage 4 cancer and she died. Right? I've had my heart broken. I've been fired from jobs. I've been, lied to. I've been mistreated. I've been undervalued. I got sexually assaulted while sober. Like, life happens. And thank God I was taught that getting sober didn't mean that things were going to be easy. Thank God I was taught that, sobriety is not about butterflies and unicorns, right? Really, it's just an invitation to join the human race, right? It's just an invitation to live life most of the time filled with joy and purpose and connection, even when life is unfair, even when I feel like I got a rough deal, right? And what I will close with is, my experience has proven to me that it is things that are inconvenient for me in Alcoholics Anonymous that allow me to live this life. And the longer I stay sober, and the bigger and more beautiful and more busy my life is, sometimes the less willing I am to do it. Right? Like I shared with you, I was so willing when I got here, right? Because I was beaten to a pulp. So of course I was willing. I'm not in pain most days, guys. And so because I'm not in pain, once again, these paradoxical requests, I'm not so sure if I want to do it or if I need to do it, right? The road gets narrower, though. It doesn't get wider. And I don't say that to scare anyone, right? But it is twice as hard to do what I need to do in Alcoholics Anonymous now with this big, beautiful, shiny life than it was when I had nothing. Because I got a lot of really good reasons to not do it. Before they were just excuses. I had nothing going on, right? I mean, I have an 11-month-old that I had to leave home with a nanny tonight, right? I didn't need to come, right? She's teething. She has 4 of her lateral incisors coming in at the same time. I should be home with her. I have a very, very important job that we do a lot of really important stuff. I'm very needed. I should do that before I do Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a husband. I have a mom. I have all sorts of things that need to be done. It's very easy to not pick up the phone when the new girl calls. It's very easy to not go to the meeting or take the speaking commitment. It's very easy to not want to sit down and read the big book. It's very easy, right? But once again, Alcoholics Anonymous, in my experience with recovery, is that it's for people who do it, regardless of what they want. And as long as I continue doing it, regardless of what I want, I'm pretty sure my life will continue to be bright and shiny, that I will continue to stay sober. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Brian, and I am an alcoholic. Grateful to be here tonight, grateful to be sober. I just want to thank Mariel on behalf of the group for coming here tonight and delivering just an incredible message of hope and recovery. We're right on the hour, so a couple quick announcements and we'll get out of here. Again, this meeting, the Food and the Fellowship, starts at 8 o'clock, so if you want to get here early, hang out with us, enjoy the refreshments in the back, definitely encourage you to do it. If you want to get involved with some service with this group, there's a lot of moving parts, so we always appreciate that as well. There's always a meeting after the meeting if you want to help us. Right now, we're going to have to put away some chairs. put away some of the stuff, in the back there, the refreshments and stuff. But it's customary for us to thank our speakers. They come here on their own time and expense, so we usually form a line and thank our speakers personally. Let's give one more round of applause to Mariel. And if you do care to join us, we do have a nice way of closing.